Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final security panel of 2021, supported by Celerity. I'm Craig Aston, Chief Operating Officer of Celerity, and I'm delighted to be joined by three really distinguished guests today to talk around and review 2021 from a cybersecurity point of view. I've got Ciara Mitchell with me. She's Cyber Cluster Manager for ScotlandIS. Cheryl Torano, Business Development Manager at Abertay University for the Cyber Quarter. And finally, Martin Borrett, who's an IBM Distinguished Engineer and CTO of IBM's EMEA security business. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to start with you, Martin, if that's okay. We're just talking about major trends that you've seen this year in 2021. What's been the major trends you think for cybersecurity in this year?
To rise year over year, and there's good evidence for that. I think it went up something like 10% in terms of impact and cost to organizations. And we have a lot better understanding about what those costs and business impacts are. I think underlying that, one of the key threats has been ransomware. Ransomware is probably the number one attack vector we've seen across all the different attack types and different things that can affect organizations. And in fact, it counts for about 23% of all attacks in 2021. So I think, we can firmly say ransomware is significantly on that threat landscape. And then I think the third thing for me is that zero trust has really become a mainstream topic. It really become accepted, a mainstream topic. It's here and now. I think all of my client conversations during the year have revolved around zero trust in some way. Organizations have embraced zero trust, adjusted their strategies. They're talking to their boards about zero trust. So I think this has been the year of zero trust in many ways from what's my overarching strategy and theme for cybersecurity.
Thanks for that. Ciara, what about yourself? What have you seen as the trends this year?
Yeah, well, I would totally echo everything that Martin said. And I knew today the two words we were definitely going to mention were zero trust and COVID. You can't, escape from both of those topics. And I think they're very related, as is the real focus on the whole supply chain. The supply chain risk factor is one that I've seen people talk about much more. It's been a concern for a while, but it really is top of the agenda, I think, this year. And they're all related because we have people working from home a lot more. The whole interface between work and business, and the amount of suppliers people are using, it's all related in terms of that zero trust. You need to make sure that you're verifying and checking every transaction, every interface that you're engaging with. So yeah, certainly, and also on the ransomware side, we totally agree as well. We've even seen that evolve. So now you get that double dipping factor, where not only are they having to pay once to get their data decrypted, you also have to pay twice because they're threatening to release your data to the internet. So we're seeing that happen. That's now pretty common, and that really only kicked in really in the last 12 months. And also on the ransomware side, we are seeing such a target now for critical national infrastructure. We saw the health service in Ireland, we saw the Colonial Pipeline. I know that was the end of last year, but it feels like it's still fairly recent news. So we're seeing it really targeted about how targeting areas where they can really disrupt society, disrupt all our lives, and that has definitely had kicked in the last 12 to 18 months, certainly.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think some of the big attacks have been really interesting to see how we seem to get more visibility of the big attacks. Obviously the attack on the pipeline in the US being the big one, and various other things. What about yourself, Cheryl? What's your view on what you've seen trends-wise in this year?
I agree with everything that you guys have said. Like the threat landscape has increased so much, but I'm also pleased to see that people are now actually putting their employees through cybersecurity training. They're actually stepping up and recognising that security is an issue. It doesn't get put to the bottom of the pile. I'm really pleased to see that people actually standing up and closing those security gaps. We know a lot of security gaps appeared in 2020 when people were forced to rush working remotely. I've saw a lot of people now working through closing those gaps, and that makes me so happy.
Yeah, I agree with that. We at Celerity, we've put our teams through cyber training. We also offer cyber training because, and I think it's really interesting because what our teams have said is having been put through the cyber training, it's not only for their work life, it also gives them knowledge for in their personal life as well, which is really, really important. So Ciara, you mentioned the other thing we'd obviously all talk about is COVID. Obviously, it's been on everybody's agenda again for 12 months. What do you think the impact has been on the cyber world or the cybersecurity world of COVID in this year?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting because, you know, who would have known like 12 months from we last spoke, Craig, that we're, you know, still going to be talking about it. I mean, it does feel we're in a different place now. I think a lot of businesses have become used to working in an area of uncertainty. You know, we thought it was behind us, and now we're all talking about Omicron. I'm actually self-isolating at the moment. I don't have it, but I've been told I have to self-isolate because I was close to someone who has Omicron. So, you know, the rules are changing. It's a very changing landscape. In terms of cybersecurity, I mean, I think again it just comes back to zero trust. We're all using, you know, we're all still working from home a lot. People are using their own devices. The landscape has just changed in terms of, you know, the old days when we had that fortress and we knew, you know, what was inside information traffic and what was outside and not to be trusted. You know, we're just moving way beyond that, and this whole working from home is going to remain. I know some businesses who are closing their entire offices or certainly downsizing. You know, we're not going to go back to having everybody in one location, and I think there's real benefits from that as well. I mean, because my role obviously is very focused on that driving that growth and innovation. You know, we're seeing a lot of job roles come up now where it says location virtual. You know, so it means people can access these jobs from everywhere. And you know, obviously in Scotland, outside the big 4 or 5 main cities, we have quite a rural economy, and that's absolutely brilliant that people who are studying at even places like Dundee, who often would have gone to Glasgow, Edinburgh, London, or up in the Highlands and Islands, can now access really good, high quality jobs in cybersecurity from anywhere. And I think so there is some positives to come out of COVID, as well as some challenges along the way as well.
And Cheryl, do you see those same positives? Do you see the same thing with what's happening north of the border?
Definitely. People aren't restricted by location now. We can now get talent in other areas. They're not restricted. They don't have to relocate. It's opened up more opportunities, definitely, for people to work within cybersecurity.
So Martin, zero trust. We've obviously all heard about it. The one thing we do get on these security panels is we get people watching them who aren't in the cybersecurity world because people want to learn about things. Would you like to just describe what zero trust means, why it's so important, please?
Yeah, sure. So zero trust is a really interesting concept, let's say. People often describe it as a framework, but I think of it much more like a philosophy, a concept. I think you can almost best think of it as a bit of a North Star, a guiding set of principles for an organization. And it's really about a set of things, some of which, you know, anyone who's been working in cybersecurity for years will think of as really tried and true principles that we always been doing. But it kind of reframes them, and it's almost like the timing of them is perfect, right? And maybe it's to do with COVID, you know, and the times we live in. But the three core principles are the principle of least privilege, never trust, always verify. So you're always looking to verify, revalidate who that user is, who's trying to access your service, what are they trying to do, that kind of continuous authentication, risk-based type mindset, and then assume breach. You know, assume that the worst is happening, assume that bad guys are in your organization, and really come at it from that mindset, such that you're always looking for them, you're expecting to find them. They are there somewhere. It's just, can you spot them, and what are they doing, and how bad is that thing? So it's a little bit of reframing of what we're doing and have been doing, you know, successfully in cybersecurity around these key principles. So it's not something absolutely brand new. It's not a silver bullet in itself. But if you use them as a set of guiding principles over, you know, a sustained period of time, you're going to take your organization in a direction that's going to reduce its risk, that's going to improve its cybersecurity posture, and it's going to be good for the organization. And the other thing I like about it, honestly, is that zero trust is quite understandable by just lay people, employees, by the board. You can explain what zero trust is. And in this world where everyone is trying to build trust again, particularly because of the pandemic. Everyone's trying to re-establish trust. It makes sense, right? We've just got to keep, not assuming trust, but rebuilding trust all the time.
It's really interesting. It's kind of an assume the worst approach, isn't it? It's assuming the worst and verifying everything. I think it's really interesting.
I mean, it sounds a bit negative, and I think in normal times people have found it too negative a narrative. But coming out of COVID, I think everyone's mindset about risk is a little different.
And Cheryl, do you think, I know Martin will have been speaking to large organisations and big companies around this whole subject. Do you think this zero trust message is getting down into the SME marketplace and into smaller businesses as well?
I think it's getting there. I think we've still got a way to go yet. But definitely there's CEOs that used to look upon things like insider threat, like, oh no, that wouldn't happen in my company. I see those views changing now. They're taking a different approach, as in they're not looking at not judging the employees, not doubting them. They now understand that human error is a big threat, and they're taking it more seriously. I think the likes of the attacks that we saw this year, so the PCA attack, things like that, it's made people realise that they are targets, it can happen. It's now not a case of if, it's a case of when. And they're now changing that mindset and looking at it properly.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I know 12 months ago, the tagline we were tagging everything was, it's when, not if. And I think that's certainly what everybody's seeing now. We're maybe a little bit ahead there. Ciara, just when you were talking about the shift to remote working, and the fact there was obviously a lot of that last year, but that's continued this year. Do you think organisations are in a better place now than they were 12 months ago with the remote working side of things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, last year, I think we can all think back kind of March, April. It was just a case of cracking on and doing it, as quickly as possible, and then trying to tidy up the mess from a cybersecurity processes, policy, culture afterwards. But I think that has started to become a lot more embedded now. We all know it's here to stay. I think even back early last year, people thought this was a temporary thing and we'll be all back in the offices before we know it. Now, we know it's here to stay. So companies have been spending that time to make sure, all the many variations of how people log on, where they log in from, what device they use, is starting to become part of their cybersecurity process and practice. That's not to say there isn't more work to be done. There's plenty of companies before COVID that weren't quite investing enough. I do agree and echo what Cheryl's saying, that they're starting to become more mainstream and more companies. So we are seeing it, but I do think there's still more work to be done. And of course, the landscape's constantly changing. So even for the ones who are investing it, you've got to keep up with that whole supply chain risk now as well. You might be safe and secure or as well protected as you can be. But is it suppliers that are your suppliers equally as prepared and focusing on their cybersecurity practices as well? I think we're going to see a lot more of that happening, those kind of conversations to make sure it's an end-to-end security practice that's in place.
I think that's absolutely true. I think certainly organisations are having to think a lot more widely and think about the other stakeholders that, as you say, supply chain's interesting, but also other organisations that you deal with. It's becoming absolutely that you have to talk to everybody about it. Certainly at board level conversations, that's certainly true. Any surprises in the year? Anything that surprised you of things that have happened? Cheryl, can we start with you with that one? Anything that's come as a surprise?
So it's been a good surprise. It is more people, their mindset is moving towards security. As we know, previously security was often forgotten about. They bumped it to the side thinking, oh, it's not happened yet, so we won't invest money in it. This year I've saw a difference in that. People are putting a bigger budget towards their security. They are taking it more seriously. And I knew it was going to happen. I didn't expect it to happen this quickly. So I'm really, really pleasantly surprised by that.
Martin, anything surprised you in the year?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I'm tempted to say no. I'm really tempted to say that nothing has really surprised me, this year. But I guess what does surprise me a bit is just the speed at which certain things are moving. So I think the speed at which zero trust has become a mainstream accepted topic. It was even mentioned in the Biden administration put out an executive order around supply chain security. So I think that is very, very topical. And even it talked about zero trust. So I think the speed that's happened, I think the speed at which organizations are digitally transforming and have been, it's almost breathtaking how fast it's all happening. And so, that does bring some challenges. I'm sure we'll get on to the challenges for next year. But maybe just the speed of transformation is surprising. But aside from that, no, I don't think it's been a year of big surprises, actually. I think it's been a tough year as always. It's demanding, challenging. We've seen lots of breaches, but I don't think, any big surprises.
Ciara, anything come across your mind in surprise terms?
Yeah, well, I was pleasantly surprised to see how much the cybersecurity sector in the UK is growing. Now, I guess that's not surprising in the sense that there'll never be more in demand, but it's even things like investment. The investment going into cybersecurity companies in the UK was just under £1 billion last year, which was up 20% from the year before. Considering most of those deals would have been done virtually, is amazing in itself. It could have been a lot higher even possibly if we weren't under lockdown conditions. And I think that's just a recognition by the investment community that this is a growing market and is going to continue to grow. The need for cybersecurity companies is not going away anytime soon. And also we really need to be investing and driving innovation and growth, because we have to stay ahead of the criminals. They're embracing AI and machine learning, and we have to make sure we've got companies who are equally doing that and able to combat the systems that the criminals are developing. They're coming out with very sophisticated techniques and tools, and we really have to make sure we're staying ahead of that. So it was great to see that we are getting the investments, we are getting the attention of the investment community, and that is starting to grow year on year.
Yeah, interesting. You should mention investment. Celerity have just taken on some investment, and one of the things our investors were most interested in was what we were doing in the cybersecurity area. So we're living proof of that being absolutely the case. So no, I completely agree. As Martin said, I think it's probably only right that we now look forward a bit to what we think is going to come in 2022. I know one of the things that I see certainly moving forward is we're seeing more organisations actually looking to split down what they're doing from a cyber point of view and out-task some of those areas to specific experts in those areas. That's one of the things I think will be big next year. Cheryl, what do you think's coming in the new year?
Well, from an Abertay point of view, we've got the brand new cyber quarter opening. So I would hope that would get industry and academia working together, working on solving the problems that we all face, getting the students to work on things in a live environment. I think moving towards that direction, that's going to be fantastic for the cybersecurity industry in Scotland.
Really positive step, isn't it? The academia and business moving together. I really hope that does start to happen. I think it certainly needs to happen, and that also then brings in the whole investment argument, as Ciara's been talking about as well. Ciara, what about yourself? What do you see as the biggest things for next year?
So I think cyber is going to continue to become more and more mainstream. And actually, I've started to talk more about it in terms of digital security. And then suddenly you see a light bulb going in. So, oh yes, cyber isn't in the corner. It is part of making sure our businesses, our data, our individuals are all secure. So I think we're seeing it move, and we've talked about it already. We're seeing it move, and more companies embrace it. But I think it's going to become more mainstream. So it's not going to be something that seems to be an afterthought kind of on the side. We're going to start talking about in terms of digital security. And everybody is going to, in the same way with health and service and lots of other things as part of the culture of the companies. I think we're moving to the times when we're all thinking and embracing digital security in ways we just haven't quite been up to now, although it is moving in the right direction. And the other one for me is, I think digital identity. I mean, I think it's, from a people perspective in particular, people are tired of companies taking their information, not knowing what this is used for, having multiple different logons across many different systems. And we can see about the UK government and up in Scotland, the Scottish government really starting to push this kind of digital identity agenda. And I think it's what a lot of people want as individuals, businesses, and there's a lot of security elements around it. And people can't then fake identity on the internet, and they can't hide either. And I think that'll be amazing when that does come around, as long as it's delivered in the right way, of course. So I'm really interested. That's a space, I guess, is one to watch in terms of what happens in that whole digital identity space.
I think that digital identity space is going to be around government and regulation, or is it a private sector sort of argument, or is it much more in the public sector?
Digitizing services, so we won't have to have different applications for passports and social care and pensions, it's all going to be combined, which also should hopefully reduce the ability to, be fraudulent, have fraudulent claims, because it should be harder to try and fake an identity, hopefully, and if things go well. But I'd love to see that across, many industries, and really that people have a lot more control over the data and know what's happening with it, and all these free services, really we know now that they're not free. They're getting commercializing it in other ways. So I do think that the table's turning on that whole area, and I think we're going to start to see that pushback. There's certainly some regulation around that coming in about, at this day and age, it should not be possible for an adult to pretend they're a 13-year-old on a gaming app. It just shouldn't be. It has to be a lot more difficult, and I think time is going to be up, hopefully, on that in the next. It could take a couple of years, but I think the tables are starting to turn.
It's good to hear. I completely agree. I think, I've got teenage children myself, and the fact that there are things happening to actually make it a safer place for them is a great thing. Martin, what about yourself? What do you see in your world? What are you seeing coming next year?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of challenges, I think we do still face some perennial challenges. I think one of the biggest ones is around skills. Finding the right skilled people, diversifying the team, finding new talent. I think skills is a big challenge. Complexity. There is tremendous complexity now across the IT infrastructure organizations are using, and we see companies adopting quite a hybrid and a multi-cloud strategy. But that in itself, together with the legacy environments that they still have, just makes the whole threat landscape expand. We see new scenarios with the Internet of Things and operational technology that's being instrumented, connected. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot of complexity, the skills challenge. And I think, and we've seen some of this in 2021, I think it's going to be more important than ever before for organizations to take advantage of automation opportunities. Automation, leveraging AI, using those zero trust principles, it's going to be critical, because otherwise we're just not going to keep up. If we don't use the latest that technology can offer us and drive those efficiencies, we're going to struggle. And so, yes, sourcing, I think you mentioned sourcing. Sourcing is a part of it, right? Clearly, there are organizations with deep skills, with amazing solutions. You're going to have to be much more prudent about how you use all of those things at your fingertips to keep up. So there's still a bit of an arms race going on, I think.
So yeah, Martin, I completely agree. Cyber skills is the thing that concerns me. It's getting harder and harder to find people. The salary expectations are going up and up, which for smaller businesses is really difficult. And also attracting people into a small business when the large businesses are recruiting at such a rate is really, really, really tough at the moment. The one thing I do think is good is we're starting to see some really good graduates coming out with really good skills coming out of the universities, and I think that's a real positive, because there seemed to be a lack of that probably 12, 18, 24 months ago, whereas now there's a real set of skills coming out. And because they've grown up in the cyber security world and in this time, they're coming out with really, really deep skills and deep interest, which I think is really interesting. I would now just to say, so we've talked about challenges. What about what IBM are going to do, Martin? What can you see that IBM is going to focus on next year?
So I think with that evolving threat landscape and expanding threat landscape we described, I think that technologies like XDR, right, and more focus on the edge with SASE are going to become really important. So more extended detection and response across the whole infrastructure, whether that's on-premise or cloud, and across all of the endpoints, the edge, if you like, which, it's harder to define now what that edge really looks like because of all the different types of devices. So I think that's going to be a big focus for us. And then one of the things we're really hunkering down around is it's modernizing. How can we help organizations modernize their security, but do it in a open way? And I think that's super important. Openness, open standards, initiatives like the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, for example, where security vendors are really working together and collaborating as an ecosystem, as a team, and the partnerships we have with yourself and others, that team element. So XDR and SASE, I think, are going to be important. Modernization, modern security platforms, and openness, really being open and driving the ecosystem, teaming to keep up with the bad guys.
I think that collaboration message is huge. I really do. Ciara, Cheryl, do you agree with that? Do you see the collaboration happening?
Definitely. And that is what we are looking to do with the Cyber Quarter. It is about collaboration between industry, academia, focusing on the skills. So, of course, we've got graduates coming out just now, and we all know a graduate goes to the interview. The first question is, do you have experience? The hope is that the Cyber Quarter will allow these graduates to gain experience while they're still in university, so they will be graduating with the skills needed to go out into industry. We also want collaboration with things like governance. So the policies, the procedures that are used in industry and academia, if we're all working on these things together, singing from the same hymn page, it's definitely going to move us in the right direction, security-wise.
Ciara, you have the same view?
Yeah, no, totally. And actually, I work quite closely with DCMS, which is part of UK government, and it's great to see that they're really pushing this collaboration and this whole levelling up, pushing things outside of London and Cheltenham, and actually really getting the rest of the UK involved in a lot of their initiatives, which is going to strengthen the UK cyber sector as a whole. For one example, I'm on the board of UKC3, UK Cyber Cluster Collaboration, which was set up with the support and DCMS, and that's all about making the cyber clusters work better together, collaborate, and really make sure that we're collectively trying to grow the UK cybersecurity sector. So yeah, I totally on board. Collaboration is definitely the way to go, and for cyber companies to work together, it is really, and for international governments to work together, it really is going to be the only way that we do stay ahead of the criminals. We're seeing a lot of it being state-backed activity. So SolarWinds, the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability, they were both state-backed attacks. So we're going to see more and more of those. So collaboration to try and stay atop of this, and sharing the information internationally is absolutely going to be paramount.
And just talking about state-backed attacks, Martin, is that something that you see as being an evolving threat?
I think what we see is a whole range of threat actors, and to be honest with you, I think the well-funded cyber criminal organizations are probably more concerning. The fact that cyber has become such a commercialized thing. I talked before about the ransomware. Some of our research shows that one of these ransomware gangs profited $123 million, right? So the commercial gains, sheer economics, of the bad guys is what's paving the way. So I'm more concerned, if you like, about cyber criminal gangs, the way that they're collaborating, the way that they are commercializing the cyber weapons, if you like, and almost, there's evidence they're offering them as a service, right? Pay as you go or commission based. They're sharing these tools and techniques. I think that is, frankly, more disturbing, if you like.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, the thought of sort of cyber criminal as a service. That's pretty scary. So we're coming to the end now. So I'd like to thank all of my guests today, Ciara, Martin, Cheryl. It's been a really interesting conversation. And thank you very much for spending the time with us. We really do appreciate it. And I know we're all looking forward to 2022. And hopefully we can all get back together next year, having had another successful year. Thank you very much, everybody.